You should step out for this one, Jessica. It's just for blood relatives." Those words still echo in my mind whenever I see a family gathering. They were spoken with such casual cruelty, such practiced nonchalance, as if my mother-in-law wasn't systematically erasing me from their family history. For 3 years, I'd been carefully positioned at the edge of photos, asked to take pictures instead of being in them, or directly excluded with polite but firm explanations about immediate, family only, and preserving the family lineage. What my mother-in-law Diane never realized was that by pushing me out of her precious family portraits, she was actually pushing me toward the biggest opportunity of my life, one that would end with my face 40 feet tall above Times Square, while she stood below, finally forced to look up at the woman she'd tried so hard to make invisible. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I wasn't born Jessica Warner. 5 years ago, I was Jessica Chen, a photographer with big dreams and a small studio in Brooklyn. I'd built a modest but growing reputation for capturing raw emotion in my portrait work. Critics called my style unflinchingly intimate and honest to the point of discomfort. I took those as compliments. Then I met Noah Warner at a charity auction where my work was being featured. He was tall, charming, and genuinely interested in my artistic perspective, rather than just making small talk. When he asked thoughtful questions about my use of natural light and unconventional framing, I was intrigued. When he followed up with an invitation to coffee rather than dinner, suggesting a local spot known for displaying emerging artists' work, I was impressed. Noah came from old money, the kind of East Coast family that had buildings named after them at prestigious universities, but he wore his privilege lightly. As a commercial architect, he'd insisted on making his own way rather than joining his father's investment firm. I admired that. Our relationship progressed quickly. Within 6 months, we were living together, and at the 1-year mark, he proposed during a weekend trip to the Catskills, where we'd gone to photograph fall foliage. Nothing showy or public, just the two of us, the mountains, and a simple question. As the sun painted the valley in gold and crimson, I said yes without hesitation. That's when my real introduction to the Warner family began. "You'll love my parents," Noah had assured me as we drove to their Connecticut estate for our first official visit as an engaged couple. "Dad's pretty laid back, and Mom can be a bit formal, but she means well." I should have paid more attention to what he wasn't saying. The Warner estate was everything you'd expect from old New England money: sprawling grounds, a colonial-style mansion with modern updates, tennis courts, and a view of the Sound that took my breath away. It screamed generations of accumulated wealth, carefully preserved and expanded. Diana Warner greeted us at the door, impeccably dressed in a cashmere sweater set and pearls, despite it being a casual Sunday lunch. She was slim and elegant, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her movements precise and deliberate. Everything about her spoke of control. "Noah, darling," she'd said, embracing her son warmly before turning to me with a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "And Jessica, welcome." That slight pause before my name, I would come to recognize it as Diana's signature move, her way of signaling that whatever followed wasn't quite genuine. Lunch was a masterclass in passive aggression, disguised as polite interest. "Photography," Diana had said, sipping her white wine. "How creative. And is there much demand for that sort of thing these days, with everyone having cameras on their phones?" "Actually, yes," I'd replied, maintaining my smile. The ubiquity of digital images has created more appreciation for thoughtful, professional work. People are increasingly seeking quality over quantity. She'd responded, a sound that managed to convey both acknowledgement and dismissal simultaneously. And where did you study? NYU for undergrad. Then I did a specialized program at the International Center of Photography. Ah, she'd said with the faintest hint of relief. So you do have formal education? Noah's father, Richard, seemed pleasant enough, but largely checked out of the conversation, occasionally interjecting with a question about sports or current events directed primarily at his son. It was clear who ran this household. That first visit set the pattern for what would follow. Diana never openly rejected me. That would have been too obvious, too gauche for someone of her social standing. Instead, she employed 1,000 subtle techniques to highlight my outsider status. There were the constant references to family traditions I couldn't possibly understand, the stories that began with, "You had to be there," and ended with meaningful glances among real family members. There were the gifts that subtly missed the mark, expensive but clearly not reflective of my actual tastes or interests, as if she hadn't bothered to learn the first thing about me. And then there were the photos. The first time it happened was at Noah's cousin's wedding, 3 months after our engagement. The bride's mother was organizing family photos after the ceremony. "Now let's get the Warner extended family," she'd called out. I moved to stand beside Noah, but Diana smoothly intercepted. "Oh, Jessica, would you mind terribly stepping out for this one? It's just for family members." Noah had frowned. "Mom, Jessica is family. We're engaged." Diana's smile had tightened. "Of course, dear, but Aunt Margaret wanted just blood relatives for this particular shot. For the family genealogy project, you understand." I'd stepped back, ignoring the knot in my stomach. It was just one photo, after all. Not worth making. A scene at someone else's wedding. But it wasn't just one photo. It became a pattern. At Thanksgiving, Diana orchestrated a family portrait in front of the fireplace. "Jessica, would you mind taking this one? You have such a good eye." At Christmas, there was the traditional Warner children photo that somehow expanded to include spouses of cousins, but not me. At Diana's birthday celebration, the photographer she'd hired was instructed to capture just the family before additional shots with friends and guests. Each time, the exclusion was wrapped in a seemingly reasonable explanation. Each time, Noah noticed too late or not at all. And each time I swallowed my objections, telling myself it wasn't worth the conflict. Besides, I had my own way of documenting our life. While Diana was creating a curated family history that conveniently excluded me, I was capturing the real moments. Noah laughing as he failed at making pasta from scratch in our kitchen. The quiet Sunday mornings reading together in bed. The impromptu dance parties when a favorite song came on the radio. Those were the images that mattered to me. Those were the moments that told our true story. But I'd be lying if I said Diana's systematic erasure didn't hurt. It did. The message was clear. I might have Noah's heart, but I wasn't really a Warner. And Diana intended to keep it that way. The turning point came in June, almost a year after our wedding, at the annual Warner family reunion. The event was held at the family's lake house in Vermont, a modest vacation property that turned out to be a sprawling waterfront compound with a main house and 3 guest cottages. Nearly 60 Warners and their spouses had gathered for the weekend. Some I'd met before, many I hadn't. Noah was excited to introduce me to relatives from across the country, and for the first couple of hours, it was actually pleasant. I met cousins who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, uncles who asked thoughtful questions about my work, aunts who shared embarrassing stories about Noah as a child. Then came the announcement that the official family portrait would be taken on the main lawn before dinner. Everyone began migrating toward the designated spot where a professional photographer was setting up lights and reflectors. Noah and I were walking hand in hand when Diana intercepted us, champagne flute in hand but barely touched. "Noah, everyone's gathering for the portrait. Jessica, would you mind terribly helping Richard with the drinks table? He never remembers. How I like things arranged." Noah looked confused. "Mom, we're going to the portrait." Diana's smile didn't waver, but her voice took on a slight edge. "Darling, this is the generational portrait. We've done it the same way for decades. Direct. Descendants only." "Jessica is my wife," Noah said, his confusion turning to annoyance. "Of course she is, and we're so happy for you both," Diana said smoothly. "But this particular portrait is a tradition. Your grandparents started it, and we've maintained it exactly as they envisioned. Bloodline only. You understand tradition, don't you, Jessica?" She turned to me with that same practiced smile, the one that never reached her eyes, the one that dared me to object and confirm every suspicion she had about my lack of breeding and understanding of proper family values. I could have argued. I could have pointed out that several other spouses were heading toward the portrait area. I could have created a scene that would have confirmed Diana's worst assumptions about me. Instead, I squeezed Noah's hand and "Oh, it's fine," I told him. "I'll go help your dad." "See? Jessica understands," Diana said triumphantly. "That's what makes her special." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The backhanded compliment hung in the air as she led Noah away, throwing one last smile over her shoulder that couldn't mask the satisfaction in her eyes. She had won this round, and she knew it. I watched them walk toward the gathering crowd, feeling a familiar mixture of hurt and resignation. This was the pattern we had established over the past 2 years. Diana excluding, Noah belatedly realizing, me acquiescing to keep the peace. But something felt different this time. Perhaps it was the accumulation of a dozen similar incidents. Perhaps it was the realization that this wouldn't stop. Not at the next family gathering, not ever. As long as I played by Diana's rules, I would always be the outsider, the girl who wasn't quite good enough for the precious Warner legacy. Richard was by the drinks table, looking slightly lost as he attempted to arrange glasses in some sort of order. He glanced up as I approached, relief evident on his face. "Jessica, thank goodness. Diana wants these arranged by something. Size, I think? Or maybe it was type. I can never keep her instructions straight." Richard Warner was the opposite. Of his wife in many ways. Relaxed where she was rigid, genuinely warm where she was performatively polite. I had a suspicion he stayed deliberately oblivious to the dynamics between Diana and me, preferring the path of least resistance. "Height and then type," I said, beginning to rearrange the glasses. "She explained it to me at Christmas." Richard chuckled. "You're a better student than I am. After 35 years of marriage, I still can't keep her systems straight." We worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, arranging the drinks table to Diana's exacting specifications. In the distance, I could see the family assembling on the lawn, dozens of Warners arranging themselves by height and age for the portrait. Noah stood with his cousins, occasionally glancing in my direction with a frown. "You know," Richard said, suddenly, "Diana means well. She's just particular about traditions." I looked at him, surprised by the direct acknowledgement of what was happening. Richard usually steered clear of anything resembling conflict or confrontation. "Is excluding spouses also a tradition?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Richard had the grace to look embarrassed. "Not historically, no. That's a more recent interpretation. In other words, it was a rule Diana had invented specifically to exclude me. The confirmation shouldn't have hurt. I'd already known the truth, but hearing it acknowledged made my chest tighten. "I see," I said quietly, focusing on arranging the wine glasses with unnecessary precision. Richard sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "Diana has always believed in preserving the Warner legacy exactly as she envisions it. She did the same with Noah's previous girlfriends." "I'm his wife, Richard, not a girlfriend." He nodded, acknowledging the distinction. Yes, you are. And a rather remarkable one, from what Noah tells me. He's very proud of your work, you know. Shows me articles about your exhibitions, keeps your photographs on his desk at the office. The information surprised me. Noah was supportive of my career, certainly, but he rarely mentioned sharing my accomplishments with his family. I had assumed they knew little about my professional life beyond the basics. Diana knows about my work? I asked. Richard chuckled. Diana makes it her business to know everything. She has a Google alert set up for the Warner name, and I suspect, for a few additional names as well. The idea that Diana had been monitoring my career while simultaneously treating me as inconsequential made something shift inside me. Not anger exactly, but a crystallization of understanding. Diana's behavior wasn't just about tradition or family legacy. It was about control. About maintaining the fiction that she determined who was significant in the Warner orbit. And by quietly accepting my exclusion time after time, I had been reinforcing that control. Across the lawn, the photographer was directing the family into their final positions. Noah was looking increasingly uncomfortable, his eyes finding mine repeatedly. You should be in that photo, Richard said quietly. Diana doesn't think so. Diana doesn't always get to decide. He hesitated, then added, and neither do you. I looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean, Richard said carefully, that by always accommodating Diana's preferences, you might be setting a pattern that will be difficult to break. Noah looks to you for cues on how to respond. If you accept being sidelined, he'll eventually stop questioning it. It was the most direct Richard had ever been with me, and the unexpected insight caught me off guard. I had been so focused on not creating conflict, on being the bigger person, that I hadn't considered how my acquiescence was shaping Noah's behavior. Before I could respond, there was a commotion from the lawn. Noah had stepped out of the arrangement and was walking purposefully toward us, ignoring Diana's calls to return to his position. Noah! We're ready to take the picture. Diana's voice carried across the lawn, the perfect blend of authority and maternal concern. Then you'll have to take it without me, Noah called back without breaking stride. Diana's face tightened in displeasure. She glanced around, aware of the attention their exchange was attracting, and quickly followed her son across the lawn, her heels sinking slightly into the grass with each determined step. I watched their approach, an unexpected warmth blooming in my chest at Noah's show of support. Richard quietly excused himself, retreating to the safety of the porch and leaving me to face the incoming storm alone. Noah, darling, you're making a scene, Diana said as she caught up to her son, her voice low but intense. Everyone is waiting. They can keep waiting, Noah replied, reaching my side and taking my hand firmly in his. Or they can take the picture without me. I'm not participating in a family portrait that excludes my wife. Diana's practiced smile was slipping, her composure fraying at the edges. This isn't about excluding anyone. This is about respecting a family tradition that predates your marriage. A tradition you've conveniently reinterpreted, Noah countered. Dad told me that spouses have always been included in the family. Portrait? Always. Diana shot a betrayed look toward the porch where Richard was suddenly very interested in his drink. That's not exactly... It's exactly true, Noah interrupted. Just like it's true that you've found ways to keep Jessica out of every family photo since I introduced her to you. The Christmas portrait, the Easter gathering, your birthday, every single time. I squeezed his hand, both in gratitude for his support and in warning not to escalate the situation further. As satisfying as it might be to see Diana confronted, with her behavior, creating a public scene at the family reunion wouldn't solve anything. Noah, I said quietly, it's okay. We can talk about this later. No, it's not okay, he replied, his voice firm but controlled. And we're going to address it now. Diana's eyes darted between us, calculating her next move. The rest of the family was watching from the lawn, pretending not to stare but clearly interested in the drama unfolding by the drinks table. "Noah, I think you're overreacting." Diana tried again, her voice honey-sweet with reasonableness. "No one is trying to exclude Jessica. I simply wanted to maintain the tradition as your grandparents established it. For the historical record." "The historical record," Noah repeated flatly. "Mom, do you hear yourself? Jessica is my wife. She is my family, my primary family now. If she's not in the historical record, then neither am I." Diana's mouth tightened, her practiced facade cracking further to reveal the steel beneath. "You're being dramatic. This is one photograph." "No, it's a pattern," Noah countered. "And it stops today." He turned to me, his expression softening. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, but I see it now." Then to Diana. "Either Jessica is included in the family portrait, or I'm not in it. That's the choice." Diana stood very still, the picture of affronted dignity. I could almost see the calculations running behind her eyes. The social cost of a scene versus the irritation of having me in her precious family portrait. Principles versus appearances. It was clear which would win. "Fine," she said. The word clipped and cold. "Jessica may join us for the portrait." Noah shook his head. "Not may join us like she's being granted some special favor. Jessica is family. She belongs in the family portrait. Say it." Diana's eyes widened at being pressed. This wasn't how these exchanges usually went. Typically, she made a pronouncement. People accommodated her, and life proceeded according to her design. "Noah, really, this is unnecessary." "Say it, Mom." A tense silence stretched between them. I was both touched by Noah's defense and uncomfortable with the confrontation. This wasn't how I wanted to be incorporated into family traditions, through ultimatums and public standoffs. Finally, Diana relented, though each word seemed physically painful for her to speak. "Jessica is family. She belongs in the family portrait." "Thank you," Noah said simply. Then he turned to me. "Shall we?" As we walked toward the waiting photographer, Diana fell into step beside us, her composure rapidly reassembling itself. "We'll position you at the end of the back row," she said, as if nothing unusual had just occurred. "Next to Aunt Meredith." The edge of the photo, still marginalized, but at least included. I started to nod my acceptance of this compromise when Noah spoke up again. "Jessica will stand with me, Mom. Where spouses have always stood in this tradition you're so concerned about preserving." Diana's smile froze, but she didn't argue. The battle lines had been drawn, and she was shrewd enough to recognize she'd lost this round. The portrait proceeded, without further incident. I stood beside Noah, his arm around my waist, surrounded by Warner relatives who pretended the previous drama hadn't happened. Diana directed the photographer with practiced efficiency, ensuring everything was perfect according to her vision, or as perfect as it could be with me prominently included. Afterward, as the family dispersed to prepare for dinner, Noah pulled me aside. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have noticed what was happening sooner." "It's not your fault," I assured him. "Diana is subtle." Noah laughed without humor. "There's nothing subtle about my mother. I just didn't want to see it. It was easier to pretend everything was fine." I couldn't argue with that assessment. Diana's campaign of exclusion had been obvious to anyone paying attention. Noah had chosen not to pay attention, and I had chosen not to force the issue. "What changed today?" I asked. Noah was quiet for a moment, watching his mother across the lawn as she directed the caterers with the same precision she applied to everything in her domain. "I saw your face," he said finally, "when Mom told you to help Dad instead of joining. The photo." I saw how you looked, and I realized it wasn't the first time I'd seen that expression. I've been seeing it for 2 years, every time my family gets together, and I've been ignoring it because it was easier. He turned to me, his expression serious. I married you, Jess. Not my mother's idea of a suitable wife, not the Warner family. Legacy. You. And I've been letting Mom chip away at that because confronting her seemed too hard. I leaned into him, resting my head against his shoulder. Thank you for seeing it, for saying something. It shouldn't have taken this long, he said, pressing a kiss to my hair. But things will be different now. I promise. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as I watched Diana across the lawn, her posture perfect even as she directed servers and adjusted table settings, I had my doubts. Diana Warner was not a woman who accepted defeat graciously or permanently. This confrontation had been a battle, not the war. And sure enough, during dinner, she found her opportunity to remind me of my place. Jessica, she called down the long table, her voice carrying easily over the dinner conversation. I've been meaning to ask how your little photography business is doing. Noah mentioned you had some sort of showing recently. My little photography business had been featured in Art Forum the previous month. The some sort of showing had been a solo exhibition at a respected Chelsea gallery that had sold out within 2 weeks. Noah had sent Diana the press coverage. I'd seen the email. It's going well, thank you, I replied neutrally. The exhibition was quite successful. How lovely, Diana said with practiced warmth. It's so important to have hobbies that bring fulfillment, especially creative ones. My mother always said that an artistic outlet was essential for a balanced life. A hobby. She had reduced my career to a hobby, my professional success to a charming pastime. And she'd done it so smoothly that objecting would make me seem defensive and ungrateful for her interest. Beside me, Noah tensed, ready to jump to my defense. Again. I placed a hand on his knee under the table, silently asking him to let it go. We'd had one confrontation today. Another would only reinforce Diana's narrative that I was difficult and oversensitive. But as I smiled and nodded and allowed Diana to dismissively categorize my life's work, something shifted inside me. A decision crystallized, born from years of subtle slights and careful exclusions. I would no longer play Diana's game. I would no longer accept being minimized. But neither would I engage in direct confrontation. That was playing on her terms, in her arena. No, I would find another way to establish my place, not just in Noah's life, but in my own right. Diana had no idea who she was really dealing with, but she was about to find out. The morning after the family reunion, Noah and I packed our bags in relative silence. The confrontation with Diana had left us both drained, but also strangely liberated. Something had shifted in our relationship with the Warner family, and we were still adjusting to the new reality. As we loaded our suitcases into the car, Diana appeared on the porch of the main house, immaculately dressed despite the early hour. She glided down the steps toward us, her expression carefully neutral. "Leaving so soon?" she asked, though we had already told her our departure time the night before. "Early meeting tomorrow," Noah replied, his tone polite but reserved. The warmth that usually characterized his interactions with his mother was noticeably absent. Diana nodded, then turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Jessica, it was lovely having you with us this weekend. I hope you'll join us for the Labor Day gathering at the beach house." The invitation surprised me, not because Diana had never invited me to family events before. She was too strategic to be that obvious, but because there was a new note in her voice. Not warmth, exactly, but a calculated recalibration. Diana Warner was nothing if not adaptable. "Thank you," I said simply, not committing either way. Diana's gaze lingered on me for a moment, assessing. I had the distinct impression she was recategorizing me in her mental hierarchy. No longer just the inconvenient wife to be tolerated, but an obstacle that required more sophisticated handling. "Drive safely," she said finally, embracing Noah and air-kissing my cheek before retreating back to the house. As we pulled away from the estate, Noah exhaled heavily. That was different. "Your mother doesn't give up easily," I observed. "She's just changing tactics." Noah glanced at me, a rueful smile playing at his lips. "You figured her out faster than most people." "Professional hazard," I replied. "Photographers have to read people quickly, understand the story behind the facade." We drove in companionable silence for a while, the verdant Connecticut countryside rolling past our windows. I thought about Diana's subtle recalibration, her immediate pivot to a new strategy once the old one had been challenged. There was something almost admirable about her adaptability, her refusal to acknowledge defeat. "What are you thinking about?" Noah asked, glancing away from the road briefly to study my expression. "Your mother," I admitted, "and how she sees the world." Noah's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry about everything. I should have stepped in sooner." "It's not your fault," I said automatically, though part of me had wondered over the past years why he hadn't noticed Diana's systematic campaign to minimize me. "It is, though," he insisted. "I've spent my whole life trying to navigate around Mom's intensity, finding the path of least resistance. It became second nature to just go along with whatever she wanted, even when I didn't agree." I nodded, understanding. Diana Warner was a force of nature. She didn't demand compliance. She simply created a reality where non-compliance seemed impossible, or at least exhaustingly difficult. "What changed yesterday?" I asked, genuinely curious. Noah was quiet for a moment, considering. "I realized that by trying to keep the peace with Mom, I was betraying you. And that's not a price I'm willing to pay anymore." The simple declaration warmed me, but I also recognized that Noah's awakening wouldn't automatically solve our Diana problem. The Warner matriarch had spent decades perfecting her methods of control. She wouldn't relinquish it easily. "She'll try again," I warned. "Different approach, same goal." "Probably," Noah agreed with a sigh. "Mom doesn't handle opposition well, but we'll deal with it together this time." I nodded, suddenly feeling more optimistic than I had in months. It wasn't that I expected Diana to change. People like her rarely did. But knowing that Noah and I were finally united in how we approached her made all the difference. As we merged onto the highway heading back to New York, I found myself thinking about my upcoming meeting with Ethan Reeves, creative director at Blake Media, one of the largest advertising agencies in the country. The meeting had been scheduled for weeks, arranged through my gallery representative who had connections at the agency. I had no idea what they wanted with me. My photography wasn't exactly commercial in the traditional sense, but I was intrigued enough to agree to the meeting. Now, after the weekend's events, the timing felt serendipitous. Perhaps a new professional. Opportunity was exactly what I needed to redefine my place not just in the Warner family constellation, but in my own career trajectory. "I almost forgot," I said. "I have that meeting at Blake Media tomorrow." Noah brightened. "That's right. Any idea what they want yet?" "None. Julie was pretty cryptic about it. Just said they were fans of my work and wanted to discuss a potential project." "Could be interesting," Noah mused. "Blake Media handles some major accounts." I nodded, trying not to get my hopes up. Commercial work wasn't typically my focus. I preferred the artistic freedom of gallery exhibitions and editorial assignments. But the idea of expanding my professional horizons was appealing. And if I was being completely honest with myself, the prospect of a high-profile commercial project that might raise my professional status in Diana's eyes held a certain vindictive appeal. Not that I needed Diana's approval. But after years of having my career dismissed as a little hobby, the thought of forcing her to recognize my professional success was undeniably satisfying. We arrived home to our Brooklyn brownstone by mid-afternoon. The two-story house had been Noah's before we met, but we'd renovated it together after our marriage, blending his architectural precision with my more intuitive sense of space and light. The result was a home that felt uniquely ours, warm, creative, and utterly different from the formal Warner estate. I spent the evening reviewing my portfolio for the Blake Media meeting, selecting images that showcased the emotional intimacy that had become my signature style. As I sorted through photos, I came across a series I'd shot of Noah and me during a weekend in Montauk last fall. Candid moments of us walking on the beach, laughing over breakfast, reading together on the porch of our rental cottage. Something about those images, their unguarded authenticity, the genuine connection they captured, felt right for tomorrow's meeting. On impulse, I added them to my portfolio selection. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a crisp white shirt, black tailored pants, and a structured blazer, professional but still creative. My stomach fluttered with anticipation as I headed to Blake Media's Manhattan offices, located in a sleek glass tower in Midtown. The reception area was exactly what you'd expect from a top-tier advertising agency. Minimalist furnishings, dramatic lighting, and walls showcasing the company's award-winning campaigns for clients ranging from luxury fashion brands to global technology companies. Jessica Warner? The receptionist smiled up at me. Mr. Reeves is ready for you. Please follow me. I was led through an open-plan workspace buzzing with creative energy to a glass-walled conference room with stunning views of the city. Ethan Reeves rose to greet me as I entered, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the relaxed confidence of someone at the top of his field. Jessica, thank you for coming in, he said, shaking my hand firmly. I've been an admirer of your work for some time. Thank you, I replied, genuinely flattered. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about why Blake Media is interested in my photography. My style isn't exactly commercial. Ethan smiled. That's precisely why we're interested. Please, have a seat. As I settled across from him, a young woman entered with a tablet and took a seat beside Ethan. This is Zoe Chen, our creative strategist, Ethan introduced. She's the one who originally brought your work to my attention. Zoe nodded enthusiastically. I saw your exhibition at the Lumen Gallery last year. Your ability to capture authentic connection is extraordinary. Thank you, I said, warming to their genuine appreciation of my work. That exhibition was particularly meaningful to me. I could tell, Zoe replied, which is why I thought, you might be perfect for our new campaign. Ethan took over, leaning forward slightly. We've recently been approached by Connect Life, a new social media platform focused on authentic relationships rather than curated personas. They're looking to launch with a major campaign that emphasizes genuine human connection in a digital age. The anti-Instagram, essentially, Zoe added with a smile. And you think my photography would align with their brand values? I asked, beginning to understand why they'd reached out. Exactly, Ethan confirmed. We want to create a campaign that feels real, that captures authentic moments between real people. Not models, not influencers, just genuine connections. He gestured to Zoe, who tapped her tablet, bringing up a digital mood board on the wall screen. It featured images that emphasized emotional authenticity, parents with children, friends laughing together, couples in quiet, intimate moments. The tagline is "Real Connections in a Digital World," Ethan explained. We want to show that even though technology mediates our relationships, the human connection remains fundamentally authentic. I studied the mood board, already seeing how my photographic style could complement their vision. It's an interesting concept. What exactly would my involvement be? We'd like you to shoot the entire campaign, Ethan said simply. Print, digital and outdoor advertising, complete creative control within the campaign parameters. I blinked, surprised by the scope of what they were proposing. This wasn't just a one-off assignment. They were offering me an entire national campaign. That's substantial, I managed. I typically work on more intimate projects. We know, Zoe jumped in. But that's what makes your work perfect for this. You capture intimacy in a way that doesn't feel voyeuristic or staged. That's exactly what Connect Life wants to convey. Ethan nodded agreement. The budget would reflect the scope, of course. And you'd retain rights to use the images in your artistic portfolio after the campaign concludes. My mind was racing with possibilities. This kind of exposure could transform my career trajectory, introducing my work to audiences far beyond the art world. And the budget would likely allow me to fund the book project I'd been contemplating for years. I'd need to see more details about the creative brief, I said cautiously, and understand the timeline. Of course, Ethan replied, sliding a Yars folder across the table. Everything's outlined here, but there's one more aspect to discuss. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. We were particularly struck by some of the self-portraits in your portfolio, Zoe said. The ones of you and your husband. I was surprised they'd noticed those images. I'd included them almost as an afterthought. There's a genuine connection there, an authenticity that's hard to fake, Ethan continued. We'd like to feature you and your husband as one of the couples in the campaign. The centerpiece, actually. Us? I echoed, genuinely taken aback. I'm not a model. That's precisely the point, Zoe explained earnestly. This campaign isn't about perfect, photogenic people. It's about real connections. And the way you, two, relate to each other in those images. It's exactly what we're trying to capture. I hesitated, processing this unexpected proposal. I'd have to discuss it with Noah. Of course, Ethan agreed smoothly. But if he's amenable, we'd want to feature you prominently, including on our flagship billboard in Times Square. Times Square. The words hung in the air, vibrating with possibility. My photography, and potentially my image, 40 feet tall, in one of the most photographed places on Earth. The visibility would be extraordinary. And unbidden, an image flashed in my mind. Diana Warner, standing in Times Square, looking up at a massive billboard featuring the daughter-in-law she'd tried so hard to erase from family photos. The irony was almost too perfect. Take the weekend to think about it, Ethan suggested, misinterpreting my silence as hesitation. Review the materials, discuss it with your husband. We're not in a rush. I don't need the weekend, I heard myself say. I'm interested. If Noah agrees to being featured, I'm in. Ethan's face broke into a broad smile. Excellent. We'll draw up the contracts right away. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of technical details and logistical discussions. By the time I left Blake Media's offices 2 hours later, my head was spinning with possibilities. I'd just committed to the biggest commercial project of my career, one that could potentially transform my professional trajectory. And if I was being completely honest with myself, I couldn't deny the sweet satisfaction I felt imagining Diana's reaction when she saw the campaign. After years of being dismissed and excluded, I would be impossible to ignore. Noah was predictably enthusiastic when I told him about the opportunity that evening. A Times Square billboard? He repeated, his eyes wide with excitement. Jess, that's incredible. You're sure you're okay with being featured? I asked. It would mean being photographed, being visible to literally millions of people. Noah laughed. Are you kidding? I'd be honored, and honestly, a little flattered that they want me at all. They were impressed by the connection between us, I explained. They said it felt authentic. Well, it is, Noah said simply, pulling me into his arms. We are. I relaxed against him, feeling a surge of gratitude for his unwavering support. Whatever challenges Diana presented, Noah and I were a team. A real connection in an increasingly artificial world. Exactly what the AI campaign aimed to celebrate. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the Connect Life project with an intensity that surprised even me. The creative freedom Blake Media offered was exhilarating. I selected the real couples and families to feature, scouted locations that would highlight natural interactions, and developed a visual language for the campaign that emphasized warmth, authenticity, and genuine emotion. For the shots of Noah and me, I brought in a colleague I trusted to capture us with the same honesty I strived for in my own work. We spent a day being photographed in our home, at a local coffee shop we frequented, and walking through our Brooklyn neighborhood. The resulting images were everything I could have hoped for: intimate without being intrusive, emotional without being saccharine. When the first proofs of the campaign came back, I felt a surge of pride unlike anything I'd experienced in my career. This wasn't just good work, it was meaningful work that remained true to my artistic vision while reaching a broader audience than I'd ever imagined. Ethan was equally enthusiastic. "These are extraordinary, Jessica," he said during our review meeting. "Connect Life is thrilled. The CEO said you've captured exactly what their platform aspires to be." "And the Times Square billboard?" I asked, trying to sound professionally curious rather than personally invested. Ethan smiled knowingly. "We've selected this as the hero image," he said, pulling up a photograph of Noah and me sitting on our brownstone stoop, my head resting on his shoulder, both of us laughing at something just out of frame. The genuine joy in our expressions was palpable. "Perfect," I said, imagining how it would look illuminated against the night sky, visible to thousands of people passing through Times Square every hour. As the campaign launch approached, Noah and I debated whether to tell his parents about it in advance. Part of me wanted to surprise Diana, to let her discover our billboard in Times Square without warning. But Noah, ever the more diplomatic of us, suggested giving them a heads up. "Mom will find out eventually anyway," he reasoned. "Better to control the narrative." I saw the wisdom in his approach, even if it meant sacrificing the dramatic reveal I'd secretly been anticipating. So when Diana called to remind us about the upcoming Warner family dinner, a monthly tradition at an upscale Manhattan restaurant, Noah mentioned the campaign casually. "By the way, Mom, Jessica has some exciting news. She's shooting a major national campaign that's launching next week. They're even putting up a billboard in Times Square." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear Diana recalibrating, determining how to respond to this unexpected information. "How nice," she said finally, her voice neutral. "What's the campaign for?" "A new social media platform called Connect Life," Noah replied, catching my eye with a small smile. "They're focusing on authentic relationships instead of curated perfection." "Interesting," Diana said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but. "And they hired Jessica for this social media advertisement?" The subtle emphasis on social media advertisement, as if it were somehow less significant than proper advertising, was pure Diana, always finding a way to minimize, to reframe achievements in the least impressive light possible. "They specifically sought her out," Noah corrected firmly. "And it's a multi-million-dollar national campaign, not just a social media ad." Another brief silence. "Well, that's lovely. Perhaps we'll have to take a detour through Times Square on our way to dinner next week to see this billboard." "Actually," Noah said, his voice taking on a mischievous quality I rarely heard when he spoke to his mother, "Jess and I are both featured in the campaign. You'll be seeing us on that billboard." This time the silence was longer, heavier with unspoken thoughts. I could almost see Diana's perfectly composed face struggling to maintain its expression as she processed this information. "Both of you?" she finally managed. "You're modeling?" "Not modeling," Noah clarified. "The campaign features real couples and families, They wanted authentic relationships, not professional models. "I'd see," Diana said, clearly not seeing at all. "Well, that's certainly different." The conversation shifted to logistics for the upcoming dinner, but I could sense Diana's mind working overtime to process this new development. Noah, and I being featured on a Times Square billboard didn't fit neatly into her narrative about our lives or my career. It would require another recalibration of how she viewed us, particularly me. The thought gave me a small but persistent glow of satisfaction. The campaign launched on a Wednesday, rolling out across digital platforms, print media, and outdoor advertising simultaneously. By Thursday morning, the Connect Life billboard was up in Times Square, a massive illuminated testament to real connection. In the digital age, with Noah and me at its center, I received ecstatic messages from Ethan throughout the day. The campaign was generating buzz across social media, with particularly positive responses to the authenticity of the imagery. Several advertising blogs had already featured it as a refreshing departure from the typical aspirational marketing that dominated the industry. But it was our family dinner with the Warners on Friday night that I was most anticipating. Diana had suggested a new French restaurant in Midtown, conveniently, or perhaps inconveniently for her, located just a few blocks from Times Square. Noah and I arrived at the restaurant first, securing a table by the window. Richard and Diana arrived 10 minutes later, Diana impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit that probably cost more than my first car. "Noah, darling," she greeted, embracing her son warmly before turning to me with a practiced smile. "Jessica, you're looking well." I returned her smile with equal practice. "Thank you, Diana. You too." Richard, more genuinely warm as always, hugged us both. "So I hear congratulations are in order. A Times Square billboard. That's quite something." "It's been an exciting project," I acknowledged, watching Diana from the corner of my eye. She was arranging herself in her chair, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her skirt, deliberately not engaging with the topic. "Did you see it on your way here?" Noah asked innocently. "It's pretty hard to miss." Diana's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "We came directly from the apartment. Perhaps we'll see it after dinner." "You absolutely should," I said, matching her tone of polite detachment. The whole campaign turned out beautifully. Jessica was given complete creative control, Noah added proudly. Blake Media basically handed her the keys to a multi-million-dollar campaign and let her run with it. Diana took a sip of water, processing this information. "Blake Media," she repeated, recognition flickering in her eyes. The agency's reputation clearly registered with her. "They're quite significant. One of the top 3 agencies in the country," Richard supplied helpfully. "Very prestigious." Diana shot her husband a look I couldn't quite interpret. Was she annoyed that he was emphasizing the achievement, or surprised that he knew about Blake Media's standing? "And this social media company," Diana continued, turning back to me. "They're new, you said?" "Connect Life," I confirmed. "They're launching next month, but the marketing campaign is rolling out now to build anticipation. It's a platform focused on genuine connection," Noah explained. "Kind of the antithesis of the perfectly curated Instagram aesthetic." Diana nodded slowly, her expression carefully neutral. "And they approached you specifically for this project?" There was a note of something in her voice. Not quite disbelief, but a searching quality, as if she were trying to understand how this had happened. "Yes," I replied simply. They were familiar with my gallery work and felt my approach to portraiture aligned with their brand values. "Jessica's developed quite a reputation in the photography world," Richard said, with what sounded like genuine pride. "I was reading an article about her last exhibition in the Times Art section. Quite glowing reviews." I blinked in surprise. Richard had never shown much interest in my career before. Had he always been paying attention, or was this a recent development? Diana's eyes flickered briefly to her husband, then back to me. Well, she said after a moment, it sounds as though you've been very busy. The clear implication was that I'd been too busy with my career to properly focus on my role as Noah's wife. A subtle callback to Diana's long-standing belief that a Warner spouse should prioritize family obligations above all else. Incredibly busy, Noah agreed enthusiastically, either missing or deliberately ignoring his mother's undertone. But it's been amazing watching Jess work. The creative director told me they've never had a campaign generate so much positive pre-launch buzz. Diana adjusted her napkin, clearly regrouping. And you were comfortable being featured in these advertisements, Noah? It seems rather public for someone in your position. Noah laughed. Mom, I'm an architect, not a spy. Being on a billboard doesn't compromise my professional standing. Still, Diana persisted, the Warner name has certain associations. I'm just surprised you'd want to be so visible in something so commercial. And there it was, the heart of Diana's discomfort. It wasn't just that I was succeeding. It was that I was bringing Noah, and by extension the Warner name, into a realm Diana considered beneath their dignity. In her world, Warners appeared in the society pages and charity gala photographs, not commercial advertising. Actually, Noah said, his voice taking on an edge I rarely heard, I'm proud to be associated with Jessica's work. And if the Warner name gets connected to authentic relationships and genuine emotion rather than just social standing, I consider that a bonus. Diana's expression froze, the implied criticism clearly registering. For a moment, I thought she might respond sharply, but years of social training prevailed. Instead, she picked up her menu with a practiced smile. Shall we order? I hear the Coco Van is excellent here. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Richard's golf game, an upcoming charity benefit Diana was helping organize, the renovation of Noah's current architectural project. But I could sense Diana's mind working, processing this new information about my career and its implications for how she had categorized me in her mental hierarchy. After dinner, as we stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, Richard checked his watch. We have time before our car arrives, he observed. Why don't we walk over to Times Square and see this famous billboard? Diana's expression briefly tightened, but she recovered quickly. What a lovely idea, she said with practiced enthusiasm. I'm curious to see Jessica's work displayed so prominently. As we walked the few blocks to Times Square, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anticipation, certainly, but also a unexpected nervousness. Diana's opinion shouldn't matter to me. Her approval or disapproval of my work had no bearing on its quality or significance. And yet, after years of having my career diminished and dismissed by her, I couldn't deny the satisfaction I felt knowing she was about to see it elevated to literally new heights. Times Square emerged before us, a chaotic symphony of light and sound even by New York standards. And there, towering above the square on the corner of 45th and Broadway, was our billboard. Noah and me, 40 feet tall, caught in a moment of genuine connection, illuminated against the night sky. The impact was undeniable. Even in Times Square, with its sensory overload of advertising and visual stimulation, our image stood out. Not because it was louder or more colorful than the others, but because it was quieter, more authentic. A moment of genuine human connection amid the commercial cacophony. My word, Richard breathed, genuinely impressed. That's really something. Noah squeezed my hand, his pride evident in his expression. Isn't it amazing? I watched. Diana as she stared up at the billboard, her face utterly still. For once, her carefully composed expression had slipped, revealing something raw and unguarded beneath. Was it shock? Disbelief? Or perhaps just possibly a reluctant reassessment? That's really you, she said finally, her voice slightly hushed. It wasn't a question, but it carried a note of wonder, as if she were seeing us, truly seeing us, for the first time. "It's really us," Noah confirmed. Jessica's colleague took the photo in front of our brownstone. Diana continued to stare up at the image, something working behind her eyes. "It's very intimate," she said finally. "That's what Connect Life wanted," I explained. "Real moments, real relationships. And that's what you capture in your work?" Diana asked, turning to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "These kinds of moments?" There was something different in her question. Not the usual dismissive curiosity, but something more genuine. An actual interest in understanding what I did. "Yes," I said simply. "That's exactly what I try to capture." Diana nodded slowly, turning back to the billboard. For several minutes, we all stood in silence, looking up at the illuminated image of Noah and me, our connection visible for all of Times Square, and Diana Warner to see. Finally, Diana spoke, her voice so quiet, I almost missed it beneath the ambient noise of the square. "It's beautiful," she said. 2 words. Not elaborate praise, not effusive admiration, just a simple acknowledgement of truth. But coming from Diana Warner, it felt monumental. I glanced at her, searching for signs of insincerity or calculation, but for once, her expression seemed genuine, contemplative, slightly vulnerable, as if something had shifted in her understanding. "Thank you," I said quietly. Diana turned to me, the usual armor of perfect poise momentarily lowered. "You're very talented, Jessica," she said. "I should have recognized that sooner." It wasn't an apology for years of dismissal and exclusion. It wasn't a promise to change her behavior moving forward. But it was an acknowledgement, perhaps the first real one, of my value independent of my relationship to her son. As we turned to leave Times Square, Diana fell into step beside me, slightly separated from Noah and Richard, who were discussing the technical aspects of illuminated billboards. "Noah's father has been following your career," she said abruptly. "He has a Google alert for your name." I glanced at her, surprised both by the information and by her decision to share it. "I didn't know that," I admitted. Diana adjusted her handbag, not quite meeting my eyes. "Richard has always had an eye for talent, art, particularly. He collected photography before we were married." This was news to me. Noah had never mentioned his father having any interest in art beyond the obligatory appreciation expected of someone in his social position. "Noah never told me that," I said. "Noah doesn't know," Diana replied simply. "Richard's interest in art was discouraged by his own parents. Not considered a serious pursuit for a Warner man." There was something in her tone, a hint of old regret perhaps. A suggestion that Richard's life, like many aspects of the Warner family, had been shaped by expectations and appearances rather than genuine inclinations. "I see," I said, unsure how to respond to this unexpected confidence. Diana was quiet for a moment, then added, "The family portrait session is next month, for the annual Warner Christmas card." I nodded, already anticipating another exclusion, another careful explanation about immediate family only. "I'd like you to choose the photographer," Diana said unexpectedly. "Someone who can capture the kind of moments you do, authentic ones." I stopped walking, turning to face her, fully. "You want me to choose the photographer for the Warner family portrait?" Diana met my gaze, something almost like vulnerability flickering across her perfectly composed features. "If you're willing." It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a complete transformation or a tearful apology for years of subtle exclusion. But it was an acknowledgement of my expertise, my place in the family, my value beyond just being Noah's wife. And as we continued walking, Times Square's lights illuminating our path forward, I recognized it for what it was, the first step toward a new understanding between us. Diana would never be warm or effusive. She would always care about appearances and social standing. But seeing our billboard, seeing the way Noah and I connected, the authenticity of our relationship captured in that moment, had shifted something fundamental in how she perceived me. I had gone from being peripheral to central, from excluded to essential. Not because I had fought my way in or demanded recognition, but because I had stayed true to myself and my work, allowing its value to speak for itself. And as we reached the corner where Diana and Richard's car was waiting, I realized that sometimes the most powerful response to exclusion isn't fighting to be included. It's creating something so meaningful that others want to be included in it. The billboard above Times Square wasn't just a professional achievement. It was a declaration that my place, in Noah's life, in my career, and yes, even in the Warner family, was no longer defined by Diana's approval or disapproval. I had defined it myself, in my own terms, 40 feet high for all the world to see. 3 weeks after our Times Square moment, I woke early to prepare for my first photo shoot, directing the Warner family portrait session. Diana had been unexpectedly true to her word, allowing me to select every aspect of how the annual Christmas card photo would be captured. The enormity of this gesture wasn't lost on me. This wasn't just any family photo, but the centerpiece of the Warner holiday tradition, distributed to hundreds of their most important connections. I'd chosen Eliza Montgomery, a colleague whose work I deeply respected for her ability to capture genuine moments within formal settings. While her aesthetic was more traditional than mine, she had the technical precision Diana would appreciate, combined with an emotional authenticity I valued. The perfect bridge between our worlds. "Nervous?" Noah asked, finding me in the kitchen studying Eliza's shot list for the 5th time that morning. "A little," I admitted. "Your mother isn't exactly easy to please." Noah wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You've already won her over more than anyone else ever has. The fact that she's letting you orchestrate this is practically a miracle." I leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I just don't want to give her any reason to regret trusting me with this." "You won't," he said, simply. "She's seen your work now. She knows what you can do." The portrait session was scheduled at the Warner estate in Connecticut, which Diana had deemed the only appropriate backdrop for the annual photo. We arrived early to meet Eliza and help set up, pulling into the circular driveway just as she was unloading her equipment. "Perfect timing," she called, waving us over. "I was just scoping out the garden for the outdoor shots." After introductions, Eliza walked us through her vision for the day. Formal portraits in the library, more relaxed groupings in the garden, and some candid moments throughout the house. I had specifically requested that she include a mix of traditional and more spontaneous captures, hoping to blend what Diana expected with something a bit more authentic. "The light in the East Garden will be perfect in about 2 hours, Eliza." Noted, checking her watch. "That's our money shot if the weather holds." Diana and Richard arrived from their morning tennis game just as we finished our walkthrough. Diana, impeccable as always even in tennis whites, surveyed the equipment and set up with a critical eye. "Jessica," she greeted with a nod, then turned to Eliza. "Ms. Montgomery, I've reviewed your portfolio. Very impressive credentials." "Thank you, Mrs. Warner," Eliza replied professionally. "Jessica has briefed me thoroughly on what you're looking for today." Diana's eyes flickered to me, something unreadable in her expression. Yes, well, Jessica has a good understanding of both sides of the equation now. It was as close as Diana would ever come to acknowledging that I had successfully bridged the gap between artist and Warner, a gap she had once considered unbridgeable. "The rest of the family will be arriving within the hour," Diana continued. "I've arranged refreshments in the sunroom. Jessica, Perhaps you might show Ms. Montgomery the library while I change. I believe that's where you wanted to start. It wasn't a question, but the fact that Diana was acknowledging my creative direction at all felt significant. As she ascended the stairs with her characteristic grace, I caught Richard giving me a subtle thumbs up behind her back. The morning progressed better than I could have hoped. The extended Warner clan arrived in waves. Noah's sister Elizabeth with her husband and 3 impeccably dressed children. His cousin Margaret with her new fiancé. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins I had met at previous gatherings but whose names still occasionally escaped me. Each was greeted by Diana with varied degrees of warmth, all precisely calibrated to their standing in her internal family hierarchy. What surprised me was that I received the same warm double-cheek air kiss as Elizabeth, a subtle but unmistakable elevation in status. Jessica is overseeing our portrait session this year, Diana informed each arriving family member, her tone making it clear that this was both unusual and not to be questioned. She selected a wonderful photographer who specializes in family dynamics. The way she said it, as if it had been her idea all along to have me direct the session, was pure Diana. But rather than annoying me, I found it almost amusing. This was how Diana incorporated new realities into her world, by retroactively making them part of her grand design. The formal portraits in the library went smoothly, with Eliza artfully arranging each grouping to balance traditional composition, with more natural positioning. When it came time for the core family portrait, Diana, Richard, Noah, Elizabeth and her family, and me, I tensed slightly, half expecting Diana to suggest I step out, just for one shot of the direct line. But the moment never came. Instead, Diana surprised me by asking, "Where do you think I should stand, Jessica? You have the better eye for these things." The simple acknowledgement of my expertise, offered so casually in front of the entire family, felt more meaningful than any elaborate praise could have. I guided Diana to the center position, with Richard beside her and the rest of us arranged artfully around them. Not at the edge this time, but fully integrated into the composition. As Eliza worked, I watched Diana. Her perfect posture, her practiced smile, the way she subtly angled herself to catch the light most flatteringly. She had spent decades perfecting the art of being photographed, of presenting precisely the image she wished the world to see. Yet today, something was different. There was a softness around her eyes I hadn't noticed before, a slight relaxation of the rigid control she typically maintained. When Noah made a joke that caused everyone to laugh genuinely, Diana's smile reached her eyes in a way I had rarely witnessed. Eliza, consummate professional that she was, caught the moment perfectly. The entire Warner family in a moment of authentic joy, polished facade momentarily set aside. "Beautiful," she murmured, continuing to shoot as the moment extended naturally. "Just keep talking normally, pretend I'm not here." And surprisingly, they did. Elizabeth shared an anecdote about her oldest son's school play. Richard chimed in with a self-deprecating story about his recent golf tournament, and the conversation flowed with an ease I had never experienced in this room before. Diana caught my eye across the group, a question in her expression. I nodded slightly. Yes, this was exactly what I had hoped for. The genuine connection beneath the perfect appearance. She held my gaze for a moment longer than usual, then inclined her head in what seemed like acknowledgement before turning back to the conversation. After the library session, we moved to the garden for the more casual portraits. The November weather had cooperated, providing bright sunshine that illuminated the meticulously maintained grounds. Here, Eliza encouraged more movement and interaction, Richard with his arm around Diana, Noah lifting his niece onto his shoulders, Elizabeth's husband teaching their youngest son how to make a funny face. I stood back, watching the scene unfold, when Diana unexpectedly appeared beside me. "This is quite different from our usual portraits," she observed, her tone neutral. Is that a problem? I asked, suddenly concerned I had overstepped. Diana considered for a moment, watching as Eliza captured Noah in an unguarded moment of laughter with his sister. No, she said finally. It's refreshing. Though I hope she's getting some where we're all looking at the camera as well. Aunt Meredith will expect the traditional shot for her mantelpiece. We got several of those in the library, I assured her. This is more for the additional shots, the ones that capture the feeling of family, not just the appearance of it. Diana's eyes lingered on me, something thoughtful in her expression. You've given this a great deal of consideration. It's important, I said simply. These photos will be how you remember these moments years from now. They should reflect what's real, not just what looks perfect. What's real? Diana repeated softly, almost to herself. Yes, I suppose that's what your work has always been about, hasn't it? Before I could respond, Eliza called out that she wanted a shot of the two of us. Diana and I turned in surprise. Just as you are, Eliza directed, camera already raised. The conversation looks genuine. Diana hesitated for just a fraction of a second before shifting slightly toward me, her usual portrait smile starting to form. But then, in a movement so subtle I almost missed it, she relaxed that practiced expression into something more natural. Let's give Jessica what she wants, she said quietly, for my ears only. Something real. The resulting photograph, which Eliza showed us on her camera display moments later, captured something I had never expected to see. Diana Warner and myself in a moment of genuine connection, the usual barriers momentarily lowered, too, women finding unexpected common ground. That's lovely, Diana said, studying the image. You'll make sure I get a copy of that one, won't you, Jessica? Of course, I agreed, still processing the shift that had just occurred between us. As the session continued into the afternoon, I found myself observing Diana with new eyes. The woman who had spent years subtly excluding me from family documentation was now actively ensuring I was properly positioned in every grouping. The change was so dramatic that Elizabeth commented on it as we helped Eliza pack up her equipment at the end of the day. Mom seems different with you, she noted, handing me a light reflector to fold. Less mom-like. I smiled non-committally. The billboard made an impression, I think. Elizabeth laughed. That's putting it mildly. She called me the morning after she saw it, you know. First time in my memory she's ever called before 9 a.m. unless someone was in the hospital. This was news to me. What did she say? That she might have misjudged you, Elizabeth said, lowering her voice as she glanced toward the house where Diana was reviewing the shot list with Eliza. Which, coming from Diana Warner, is basically the equivalent of falling to her knees and begging forgiveness. I laughed despite myself. I wouldn't go that far. You don't know her like I do, Elizabeth replied, her tone light but her eyes serious. Mom doesn't admit mistakes, ever. The fact that she acknowledged even the possibility with you is unprecedented. I absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with the Diana I had known for the past 3 years. She's been different since the billboard, more accepting. It's not just the billboard, Elizabeth said thoughtfully. Though that certainly made an impact. It's you. The way you've handled everything. You never pushed back directly. Never created scenes, but you also never compromised who you are. She smiled ruefully. Trust me, as someone who tried both confrontation and conformity with limited success, your approach has been fascinating to watch. I wasn't playing some long game, I clarified. I just tried to stay true to myself without unnecessarily antagonizing your mother. That's exactly why it worked, Elizabeth said. Mom can spot strategy a mile away. She practically invented social chess. But authenticity? That's her blind spot. She doesn't know quite what to do with it. She paused, then added, with you. Our conversation was interrupted as Diana approached, her social smile firmly in place. Elizabeth, darling, Tom is looking for you. Something about your flight time tomorrow. Elizabeth nodded, giving my arm a quick squeeze before heading toward the house, leaving me alone with Diana. Eliza tells me she captured some wonderful moments today, Diana said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her perfectly tailored slacks. She seems quite impressed with your direction. She did all the work, I demurred. I just helped with the concept. Diana studied me for a moment. Her head tilted slightly. You have a habit of doing that, Jessica, minimizing your contributions. The observation caught me off guard, both for its insight and because it came from Diana, who had spent years minimizing me herself. Perhaps, I acknowledged. Professional hazard. Photographers are used to being behind the camera, not in front of it. Diana murmured, her gaze shifting to the gardens where Noah was helping his niece and nephews collect fallen leaves for a project. That's changing for you now, isn't it? With the Billboard campaign. In some ways, I agreed. Though I'm still more comfortable creating images than being in them. Diana nodded, seeming to understand something fundamental about me that I hadn't expected her to grasp. Thank you, she said suddenly, the words coming out formal but sincere. For today, for understanding what these portraits mean to our family. Of course, I replied, unsure how else to respond to this unexpected gratitude. No, not of course, Diana corrected, a hint of her usual crispness returning. Most people in your position, after being excluded, as you were, might have pushed for something radically different, something that rejected tradition entirely. She was right, of course. Part of me had been tempted to suggest something completely unconventional for the Warner family portrait, if only to shake up their rigid expectations. But instead, I had found a middle path, honoring the tradition while infusing it with greater authenticity. That wouldn't have served anyone, I said simply, least of all the photographs themselves. Diana's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You understand more than I gave you credit for. It was as close to an apology as Diana Warner was likely ever to offer. Not for the years of exclusion, not for the countless small ways she had tried to erase me from family documentation, but for underestimating me, for failing to see that I could understand and respect tradition while still bringing my own perspective. We all have blind spots, I offered, a peace offering of my own. Diana nodded once, decisively, as if something had been settled between us. Noah tells me that your gallery is planning another exhibition in the spring. Yes, I confirmed, surprised that Noah had mentioned it, and even more surprised that Diana remembered. A continuation of my urban intimacy series. I'd like to attend the opening, Diana said, the statement landing between us with the weight of a much larger gesture. If that would be all right with you. 3 years of subtle exclusion, of having my career dismissed as a hobby, of being relegated to the periphery of Warner family life. And now Diana was volunteering to step into my world, to publicly acknowledge my professional identity. I'd like that, I said, meaning it more than I had expected to. Diana nodded again, matter settled. Good. Now, shall we join the others? Richard is insisting on making his infamous mulled cider, which is really just store-bought cider that he waves a cinnamon stick over. But we all pretend it's special. This small confidence, this tiny crack in the perfect Warner facade, offered so casually, felt more significant than the invitation to my exhibition. Diana Warner was allowing me to see behind the curtain, if only for a moment. I'll be sure to look appropriately impressed, I promised with a smile. See that you do, Diana replied, but there was a warmth in her tone I had never heard before. He's quite proud of it. As we walked together toward the house, I realized that something fundamental had shifted between us. Not friendship exactly. Diana Warner would never be the mother-in-law who treated me like a daughter. But respect, perhaps. A mutual recognition that we each brought something valuable to the family we now shared. It wasn't everything, but it was more than I had ever expected to have with Diana Warner. And it had begun with a billboard in Times Square, with my face 40 feet tall in a place where I couldn't be erased or excluded or minimized, with the ultimate family portrait that Diana hadn't controlled. Life has a funny way of coming full circle sometimes. The holidays arrived with their usual flurry of activities, but this year felt different. The Warner family Christmas card, featuring the portrait Eliza had captured of us all laughing in the library, arrived in early December. For the first time, my name was printed alongside Noah's in the elegant script Diana insisted upon. Not Noah and wife, or simply the Warners as it had been in previous years, but Noah and Jessica Warner. A small detail, perhaps, but one that spoke volumes about my new place in the family hierarchy. The annual Warner Christmas Eve gathering, typically a formal affair at the Connecticut estate, was another revelation. Instead of being seated at the periphery of the dining table, I found myself placed between Noah and Richard, directly across from Diana, a position of honor in Diana's meticulously planned seating arrangements. "Jessica, you must tell everyone about your upcoming exhibition," Diana announced during dessert, catching me mid-bite of her legendary chocolate torte. "The gallery on Madison, isn't it? Very prestigious." All eyes turned to me, many of the extended family members visibly surprised by Diana's enthusiastic promotion of my work. Noah squeezed my knee encouragingly under the table. "Yes, Madison and 78th, I confirmed after swallowing hastily. "The exhibition opens in April. It's a continuation of my urban intimacy series, exploring how people create private moments in public spaces." "Fascinating concept," Richard chimed in, his genuine interest apparent. "Will you be including any of the photographs from the Connect Life campaign?" "No, those belong to Blake Media," I explained. "But the campaign was actually inspired by my gallery work, so there's a clear through line." "Jessica is being modest," Diana interjected. "Blake Media specifically sought her out because of her unique artistic perspective. They built their entire campaign around her vision." The table fell momentarily silent, the shock of hearing Diana Warner enthusiastically praising her once-dismissed daughter-in-law's career almost palpable. Elizabeth caught my eye from down the table, raising an eyebrow in amused disbelief. "We're planning to attend the opening," Diana continued, including Richard in her statement with a gesture. "I understand the gallery is limiting attendance to ensure an intimate experience." "Yes, but family is automatically included," I assured her, still adjusting to this new reality where Diana not only acknowledged my career, but actively promoted it to the extended Warner clan. "Excellent," Diana declared with satisfaction. "We'll make an evening of it. Dinner at Le Bernardin beforehand. Perhaps." And just like that, my exhibition opening was incorporated into the Warner social calendar, elevated from artistic event to society occasion through Diana's endorsement. 6 months ago, I might have resented this co-opting of my professional achievement. Now I recognized it for what it was, Diana's way of signaling to everyone that my success was now family success, my identity now interwoven with the Warner legacy she guarded so fiercely. After dinner, as the family dispersed throughout the house for coffee and conversation, I found myself alone in the library with Richard, who was examining the family portrait now prominently displayed above the fireplace. "Quite a change from last year's portrait," he observed as I joined him. "More alive, somehow." "That was the goal," I acknowledged, "to capture something genuine within the traditional framework." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Diana has never admitted she was wrong about anything in the 35 years I've known her." He glanced at me, a twinkle in his eye. "Not once. Not even when she was demonstrably, factually incorrect about the capital of Australia during a dinner party. She maintained it was Sydney with such conviction that our guests went home and looked it up just to be sure." I laughed, trying to imagine Diana Warner being definitively wrong about anything. She's certainly confident in her perspectives. Indeed, Richard agreed dryly, which is why her evolution regarding you has been so remarkable to witness. I hesitated, unsure how candid I could be with Richard about his wife. She's been more welcoming recently. Richard chuckled. That's putting it mildly. Diana has completely recategorized you in her mental hierarchy. You've gone from unfortunate choice that will hopefully be temporary to unexpectedly valuable family asset in record time. Though his description was amusingly accurate, I winced slightly at being so clinically assessed. I'm not sure how I feel about being considered an asset. Oh, it's a compliment of the highest order in Diana speak, Richard assured me. Diana views the world in terms of what strengthens or weakens the Warner family position. For years, she saw your background and career as potential liabilities, not aligned with her vision of Warner family standing. And now? I asked, curious despite myself about how Diana's view of me had transformed. Now she sees that you bring something unique and valuable to the family, creative success, visibility in circles the Warners haven't traditionally accessed, a modern relevance that the family name alone couldn't achieve. Richard smiled gently. But more importantly, she sees how happy you make Noah, how much stronger he is with you than without you. The observation touched me unexpectedly. I didn't think Diana particularly valued happiness as a metric. She values family cohesion, above all, Richard corrected, and she's finally recognized that you enhance that rather than threatening it. The Billboard was the tipping point, seeing you two together that way, so visibly connected, so publicly united. It forced her to confront the reality rather than her preconception. I considered this insight into Diana's transformation. So she's accepted me because I've proven myself valuable to the Warner family interests? Richard laughed softly. Don't sound so disappointed. For Diana, that's the highest form of approval. But no, it's more than that. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Diana respects authenticity, even though she rarely allows herself to display it. She respects that you never compromised who you are to gain her approval. I never thought she noticed that, I admitted. Diana notices everything, Richard said simply. She just doesn't always acknowledge what she sees. Our conversation was interrupted by Noah joining us, cocktail in hand. What are you two conspiring about in here? Your father was just giving me some insight into Diana's worldview, I explained. Noah groaned good-naturedly. Dad, please don't scare Jess away when Mom is finally accepting her. Richard clapped his son on the shoulder. On the contrary, I think Jessica understands Diana better than most of us. He winked at me. Keep that billboard up as long as possible, my dear. It's working wonders for family harmony. As he strolled away to join the others, Noah looked at me questioningly. Billboard therapy for Mom? Is that what Dad's suggesting? I laughed, linking my arm through his. Something like that. Apparently seeing us 40 feet tall in Times Square forced a recalibration of her perspective. Whatever works, Noah said, pressing a kiss to my temple. I'm just happy not to be caught in the middle anymore. We stood together, looking up at the new family portrait above the fireplace. Unlike previous years' formally posed photographs, this one captured genuine joy, the Warner family in a moment of authentic connection. Not perfect, but real. It's a good picture, Noah said softly. The first one that actually feels like us. Us. The word resonated differently now. Not Noah and his family plus me on the periphery, but all of us together, my place in the composition as integral as anyone else's. It's exactly how I wanted to capture this family, I said. The reality beneath the perfect surface. Noah squeezed my hand. You've changed things, you know. Not just with Mom, but with how we all see ourselves. Perhaps that had been the real power of the Times Square billboard. Not just forcing Diana to see me differently, but allowing the Warners to see themselves through fresh eyes. To recognize that authentic connection was ultimately more meaningful than perfect appearance. When the holiday gathering concluded and we prepared to leave, Diana pulled me aside in the foyer, away from the others who were saying their goodbyes. "I've been thinking," she began, her tone businesslike but not cold. "The spring benefit for the Children's Hospital needs a new approach this year. Something more genuine." She met my eyes directly. "I was wondering if you might consider photographing it. Not the usual society photographer with the posed champagne shots, but something that captures the real purpose of the event." The request stunned me. Diana's annual benefit was her crowning social achievement, meticulously documented each year, in a specific way for maximum society page coverage. Suggesting a different photographic approach was tantamount to reinventing her personal brand. "You want me to shoot your benefit?" I clarified, making sure I hadn't misunderstood. "If your schedule permits," Diana confirmed. "Your perspective would bring something valuable to our documentation. Help people remember why we're really there." I considered the offer carefully. "I'd be happy to, but I should be clear. My style isn't what your usual attendees might expect. It wouldn't be the traditional society page coverage." "That's precisely why I'm asking you," Diana said with unexpected directness. "Sometimes traditions need refreshing." Coming from Diana Warner, guardian of tradition and protocol, this statement was nothing short of revolutionary. I searched her face for signs of insincerity or calculation, but found only genuine intent. "I'd be honored," I said finally. "Thank you for trusting me with this." Diana nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. We'll discuss details after the new year." She paused, then added, "And Jessica, thank you for the family portrait. It's the first one in years that actually captured us as we are, not just as we're supposed to be." As we drove back to Brooklyn that night, I thought about Diana's words. For years, I had felt excluded from the Warner family documentation, pushed to the periphery of their visual history. Now I was being invited not just to be in the pictures, but to help create them, to shape how the Warner family presented itself to the world. The irony wasn't lost on me. Diana had spent years trying to control my place in the family narrative, only to ultimately give me a hand in crafting that narrative myself. "Penny for your thoughts?" Noah asked as we crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan skyline glittering against the night sky. I smiled, thinking of the Times Square billboard that had started this transformation. My face, 40 feet tall above the crowded streets, impossible to ignore, impossible to minimize, impossible to erase. I was just thinking that sometimes being left out of the picture is the first step toward creating your own. Noah glanced at me, a smile playing at his lips. "And sometimes ending up on a billboard in Times Square is the perfect way to get included in all the pictures thereafter." I laughed, the sound light and free in the quiet car. "That too." As we drove home through the Brooklyn streets, I thought about the journey of the past months, from excluded daughter-in-law to family photographer, from peripheral figure to central presence. It hadn't happened through confrontation or demands, but through staying true to my work, my vision, my authentic self. Sometimes the most powerful response to exclusion isn't fighting to be included. It's creating something so meaningful, so visible, so undeniably valuable that others want to be part of your picture, rather than the other way around. And sometimes, the people who try hardest to keep you out of the frame end up being the ones who ultimately hand you the camera. Spring arrived in New York with its characteristic unpredictability. Warm, gentle days followed by sudden cold snaps that had everyone digging winter coats back out of storage. My exhibition opening at the Leighton Gallery was scheduled for the first Friday in April, perfectly timed to catch the season's optimistic energy. In the months since the family portrait session, My relationship with Diana had evolved into something I never would have imagined possible. Not friendship, exactly. Diana Warner didn't really do friendship in the conventional sense, but a mutual respect that occasionally bordered on warmth. We'd worked closely on her charity benefit, with Diana surprisingly receptive to my vision, for documenting the event in a more authentic way. The evening of my exhibition opening arrived with perfect spring weather, mild temperatures and clear skies that seemed like a good omen. I'd been at the gallery since early morning, making final adjustments to the lighting and placement of each image. The exhibition, titled Intersections, explored moments of genuine connection in urban environments. Strangers making eye contact on the subway, elderly couples holding hands in the park, children from different backgrounds playing together on apartment stoops. The collection represented 2 years of work, capturing fleeting instances of humanity amid the city's chaos. Noah had been my rock through the entire process, providing both emotional support and practical assistance as I curated the final selection. "The lighting is perfect," he said, finding me adjusting the spotlights on a particularly important piece. A black and white image of an elderly man passing a flower to a young woman on a crowded street. Their fingers just barely touching, their expressions capturing the unexpected tenderness of the moment. "You think so?" I asked, still not entirely satisfied. "It feels a little harsh on the right side." Noah wrapped his arms around my waist, from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder as we both studied the photograph. "Trust your eye, Jess. It's perfect." I leaned back against him, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I'm nervous about tonight." "I know," he said simply. "But your work is extraordinary. Everyone will see that." "Even your mother?" I asked, voicing the worry that had been growing all day. Noah chuckled softly. "Especially my mother. Trust me, she wouldn't be coming if she didn't already believe in what you're doing." He was right, of course. Diana Warner wouldn't risk her reputation by publicly supporting work she didn't consider worthy. The fact that she had not only agreed to attend, but had organized a pre-exhibition dinner at Le Bernardin for a select group of influential friends was a significant vote of confidence. Still, as 7 o'clock approached and I changed into the elegant black dress I'd selected for the evening, I couldn't help feeling a flutter of anxiety. This exhibition represented the most personal collection of my work to date, images that reflected my deepest values about human connection. Having Diana witness this felt vulnerable in a way I hadn't anticipated. The gallery began filling precisely. At 7, New York's arts community arriving with their characteristic blend of enthusiasm and critical assessment. My gallery representative, Marion, expertly guided visitors through the space while I greeted familiar faces and discussed my process with interested collectors. At 7:30, exactly as promised, Diana and Richard arrived with Noah, who had left earlier to meet them for dinner. They were accompanied by 6 other couples, all impeccably dressed, all representing various pillars of New York society. Diana had, as promised, brought her influence to my opening. "Jessica," she greeted me, air-kissing both cheeks with practiced precision. "The space looks wonderful." "Thank you for coming," I replied, genuinely appreciative of her presence despite my lingering nervousness. "And for bringing your friends." "Colleagues," Diana corrected with a small smile. "Friends are people one sees socially without purpose. Colleagues are people with whom one builds mutually beneficial relationships." It was such a quintessentially Diana statement that I couldn't help but laugh. "Well, thank you for bringing your colleagues then." Diana nodded, then surprised me by taking my arm. "Show me your favorite piece," she said, "the one that matters most to you personally." The request caught me off guard. I had expected Diana to make a brief appearance, say the right things, to the right people, and then make a graceful exit. I hadn't anticipated genuine interest in my artistic perspective. "This way," I said, leading her through the gallery to a photograph near the back wall. Unlike the other images in the collection, this one wasn't of strangers connecting in public spaces. It was an image of Noah's sister Elizabeth with her youngest child, captured during the family portrait session. They were sitting on a window seat in the Warner Library, Elizabeth reading a book to her daughter, their foreheads nearly touching, completely absorbed in their shared world. I had included it in the exhibition because it captured something essential about my artistic vision: the way genuine connection creates its own intimate space, regardless of the surrounding environment. But it was also deeply personal, a moment of authentic intimacy within the formal Warner world. Diana studied the photograph for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "This was taken during our family portrait session," she said finally. "I don't recall seeing this particular image." "It wasn't part of the official selections," I explained. "This was just a moment I captured between setups. Elizabeth didn't even know I was photographing them." Diana nodded slowly, still examining. "The image? That's my mother's book," she said suddenly, pointing to the volume in Elizabeth's hands. "The collection of fairy tales she used to read to me." I looked more closely at the photograph, surprised by this information. I didn't know that. "Elizabeth wouldn't have either," Diana said softly. "She just found it in the library that day, but I recognized the binding." She was quiet for another moment, then added, "My mother had a particular way of reading those stories. She would create different voices for each character, even the minor ones. It made the stories feel alive." This glimpse into Diana's childhood, this small personal detail offered so casually, felt more significant than any formal acceptance she could have extended. Diana Warner didn't share personal memories, especially not ones that revealed sentiment or vulnerability. "That sounds wonderful," I said, genuinely moved by the confidence. Diana seemed to catch herself, straightening slightly as she recalibrated back to her public persona. "You've captured something essential here," she said, her tone becoming more analytical. "The way Elizabeth is completely present with Caroline. No distraction, no performative parenting for observers, just genuine connection." "That's exactly what I was trying to show," I agreed, impressed by her perception. Diana's gaze shifted. From the photograph to me, something thoughtful in her expression. "That's what your work has always been about, isn't it? Seeing beyond the surface to the authentic moment beneath." "I try," I said simply. "It's a gift," Diana replied, surprising me again with her directness. "To see people as they really are, not just as they present themselves." She paused, then added with characteristic precision, "Not everyone would welcome such perception, of course." I understood the subtext immediately. Diana was acknowledging, in her own way, that my ability to see beneath surfaces had allowed me to understand her, perhaps better than she had initially been comfortable with. "Perception goes both ways," I offered. "Sometimes being truly seen is as valuable as being able to see." Diana held my gaze for a moment longer than usual, something almost like approval in her expression. Then her attention was captured by someone approaching, a distinguished woman in her 60s whom I recognized as the board chair of a major museum. "Evelyn," Diana greeted smoothly. "How wonderful you could make it. Have you met my daughter-in-law, Jessica? The artist whose work we're celebrating tonight." "My daughter-in-law." Not Noah's wife or the photographer, but a direct acknowledgement of my place in the family. And more significantly, the artist whose work we're celebrating, a clear statement of familial pride and endorsement. "I've been admiring these photographs," Evelyn replied warmly. "Such an impressive eye for authentic human connection. You've captured something quite special here." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "That means a great deal coming from someone with your background in visual arts." Diana remained beside me as Evelyn and I discussed the technical and thematic elements of the exhibition, occasionally adding her own observations with unexpected insight. She had clearly paid attention to my work in a way I hadn't realized, noticing details and patterns that spoke to a genuine engagement with my artistic vision. As the evening progressed, I watched Diana move through the gallery with her characteristic grace, introducing me to her colleagues with unmistakable pride, directing their attention to specific photographs she found particularly compelling. She was, I realized with a sense of wonder, actively using her social capital to support my career, something I would have considered impossible just 6 months earlier. Near the end of the evening, as the crowd began to thin, Noah found me by the refreshment table, his expression amused. Did I just witness my mother explaining the nuances of street photography to the chief curator of the Whitney? He asked incredulously. I laughed, still processing the surreal quality of the evening myself. Apparently, Diana has developed some strong opinions about my artistic approach. Mom always becomes an instant expert on whatever she decides to endorse, Noah said with a fond eye roll. But I've never seen her champion anything artistic quite so enthusiastically. It's been unexpected, I acknowledged. But nice. Noah's expression softened. She respects you, Jess, not just because of the Billboard or the commercial success, but because you never compromised who you are to fit her expectations. I considered this, watching as Diana engaged in animated conversation with Marion across the gallery. I think she's realizing we value some of the same things, just in different contexts. Authenticity, connection, seeing beyond surfaces. My mother valuing authenticity? Noah laughed. That's not a word I'd typically associate with Diana Warner. Maybe not in the way she presents herself, I agreed, but in what she responds to, what she genuinely appreciates. Yes, I think authenticity matters deeply to her. She just doesn't know how to access it herself very often. Noah studied me for a moment, a smile playing at his lips. You understand? Her better than most people who've known her for decades. Professional hazard, I replied lightly. Photographers have to see what others miss. The exhibition officially ended at 10, though a small group lingered to continue conversations. To my surprise, Diana and Richard were among the last to leave, Diana taking a final tour of the gallery with me, while Richard and Noah discussed an architectural detail of the space that had caught their attention. This has been a remarkable event, Jessica, Diana said as we paused before a large photograph near the entrance. An image of an elderly couple dancing in Washington Square Park, surrounded by skateboarders and students, lost in their own private moment. Thank you for your support, I replied sincerely. It meant a lot having you here tonight. Diana adjusted her pearl necklace, a gesture I now recognized as a sign she was preparing to say something significant. I've been thinking about our family portraits, she said after a moment. Not just the recent ones, but all of them. The decades of carefully posed Warners documenting their existence. I waited, curious where this was leading. They're perfect in their way, Diana continued. Immaculate composition, appropriate expressions, suitable attire. A comprehensive visual record of the Warner family through the generations. She paused, studying the photograph before us. But I don't believe there's a single one that captures what you've captured here. Genuine connection, authentic emotion. The observation surprised me, both for its insight and for the note of something almost like regret in Diana's voice. Different purposes, I offered diplomatically. Family portraits serve a different function than artistic photography. Perhaps, Diana acknowledged. But I'm beginning to wonder if they haven't served us slightly too well. If in focusing so much on how the Warner family appears, we haven't sometimes lost sight of what actually matters. This level of self-reflection from Diana Warner was unprecedented in my experience. I wasn't entirely sure how to respond, so I simply waited, giving her space to continue if she wished. "The billboard," she said after another moment. "The one in Times Square with you and Noah. It captured something real between you two. Something I've spent years overlooking because it didn't fit my preconceptions of what Noah's marriage should look like." "Diana," I began, unsure what to say in the face of this unexpected vulnerability. "I'm not apologizing," she clarified, quickly a flash of the usual Diana assertiveness returning. "It's not in my nature to dwell on past misjudgments. I simply wanted you to know that I see it now. What you bring to our family, what you bring to my son's life." The statement, delivered with Diana's characteristic precision, was perhaps the closest thing to emotional acknowledgement she was capable of offering. Not quite an apology for years of exclusion and dismissal, but a recognition of their wrongness and a commitment to a different perspective moving forward. "Thank you," I said simply, understanding the significance of what she was offering. Diana nodded once, decisively, as if something important had been settled between us. "Richard and I would like to host a dinner next week. Small, just family. To celebrate the success of your exhibition." The invitation, so casual yet so meaningful, represented another shift in our relationship. Not Diana reluctantly including Ian Warner family events, but Diana actively creating an occasion specifically to honor my achievement. "I'd like that," I replied, meaning it more than I would have thought possible a year ago. Diana smiled, a genuine expression that softened her usually composed features. "Excellent. And Jessica?" She hesitated, seeming to choose her words with special care. "I hope you'll bring your camera. For informal documentation, of course, nothing official." I understood immediately what she was offering. Not just inclusion in the Warner family visual record, but an invitation to help create it in my own way. To bring my artistic vision to their documentation, to capture the Warner family as they truly were, not just as tradition dictated they should appear. "I'd be happy to," I agreed. "Just casual moments, nothing posed." "Perfect," Diana said with satisfaction. "It's time we had some photographs that show us as we actually are, don't you think? Rather than just how we've always presented ourselves." As Diana and Richard said their goodbyes and left the gallery, Noah joined me, slipping an arm around my waist. "You look surprised," he observed. "What was that about?" I leaned against him, processing the full significance of my conversation with Diana. "I think your mother just asked me to help redefine how the Warner family sees itself," I said slowly, "and how it wants to be seen by others." Noah laughed softly. "Leave it to Mom to make a philosophical breakthrough sound like a practical adjustment to family protocol. That's why it works for her," I replied, understanding Diana better than ever before. Evolution disguised as refinement. As we locked up the gallery and stepped into the spring night, I thought about the journey of the past year, from being deliberately excluded from family photos to being asked to reshape how those photos captured the Warner family identity. From being positioned at the edges to being centered not just in the frame, but in the creative vision itself. And it had all begun with a billboard in Times Square, my face 40 feet tall, impossible to ignore, impossible to minimize, impossible to erase. The ultimate visibility that had forced Diana to truly see me, not as an inconvenient addition to her son's life, but as a person with value, perspective, and vision. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of trying to exclude me from the Warner family visual history, Diana had ultimately invited me to help create it. After dismissing my career as a hobby, she was now actively championing my artistic vision. After positioning me at the periphery, she had placed me at the center. Not because I had fought my way in or demanded recognition, but because I had remained true to my own vision, creating work so meaningful it couldn't be dismissed or diminished. Because I had found a way to bridge her world of tradition and appearances with my world of authenticity and genuine connection. As Noah and I walked through the quiet streets toward home, I thought about Diana's words about the Washington Square Park dancers. Genuine connection, authentic emotion. Perhaps that was what she had seen in the Times Square billboard that had so transformed her perspective. Not just Noah and me as a suitable Warner couple, but Noah and me in a moment of real connection. The kind of connection that transcends social standing or family legacy or any of the external markers Diana had spent her life prioritizing. "What are you thinking about?" Noah asked, squeezing my hand as we walked. I smiled, remembering the long journey from excluded daughter-in-law to family documentarian. I was thinking that sometimes the people who try hardest to keep you out of the picture end up being the ones who ultimately hand you the camera. Noah laughed softly. My mother does hate being on the wrong side of history. Once she realized you weren't going anywhere, she decided to be on the right side of your success. It's more than that, I said, understanding Diana more clearly than ever. I think she genuinely sees the value in my perspective now, not just professionally, but personally. For your family. Our family, Noah corrected gently, complete with a mother-in-law who's finally recognized what I've known all along, that you're extraordinary. I leaned into him as we walked, grateful for his unwavering support through all the challenges with Diana. It only took a 40-foot billboard in Times Square. Worth every inch, Noah replied with a grin. As we rounded the corner toward our brownstone, I thought about the future Warner family portraits I would help create. Images that captured genuine moments rather than perfect poses, authentic connections rather than carefully constructed appearances. Images that would show the Warner family as they truly were, not just as tradition dictated they should be. Diana would still insist on certain elements of formality, of course. Some traditions were too deeply ingrained to abandon entirely. But there would be room now for authenticity alongside protocol, for genuine emotion alongside proper composure. A new visual legacy that honored the past while embracing a more honest present. And I would be there to capture it all, no longer excluded or minimized or relegated to the edges of the frame. No longer Jessica Chen, the inconvenient wife from the wrong background with the unsuitable career, but Jessica Warner, photographer, artist, and fully acknowledged member of the family. All because I had stayed true to my vision, creating work, so meaningful it couldn't be ignored. All because a billboard in Times Square had forced Diana Warner to look up and truly see the daughter-in-law she had tried so hard to erase. Sometimes life's most perfect karma doesn't come from fighting back against those who exclude you. Sometimes it comes from building something so significant that they ultimately want to be included in your picture, rather than the other way around. Sometimes the most powerful response to being banned from family photos is ending up 40 feet, tall above Times Square, creating an image so compelling that even Diana Warner has to acknowledge its worth. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people who work hardest to keep you invisible end up being the ones who finally see you most clearly. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.